that it consists of $1.156 billion in what we call our general fund, that's our general operating fund, $105.2 million in grant funds, and then $52.8 million in our enterprise fund, which is our food and nutrition fund. Here, this slide breaks down the revenue by the various sources, and you see that most of our revenue comes from both the state and Baltimore City, and you also see that revenue is relatively flat from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19. There's a small drop in state revenue that has to do with a reduction in non-public revenue that we expect to receive in fiscal year 19. We also have a small reduction in our federal revenue, and this is federal general fund revenue, not federal grant revenue, and that's primarily due to E-rate. Another thing that I would like to point out here is we have, over the past several years, we have had to rely on our fund balance, on our rainy day fund, in order to balance our budgets. And what we had wanted to do when we got into this whole thing last year is we want to try to be able to eliminate our reliance on our fund balance over a period of years. For fiscal year 19, we're able to reduce our reliance on fund balance from $20.7 million, which it was in fiscal year 18, to $15 million in fiscal year 19. This next slide just gives you a grant summary of the various grants, and you see that most of our dollars come from either Title I or IDEA, which is Student with Special Needs. Next, I'll talk a little bit about our general fund allocation, our general operating fund, and $782 million of that $1.156 billion is a direct school allocation. That's money that goes directly to schools and school budgets. The other $374 million is what we call centrally budgeted allocations. That's not central office. That means that they're budgeted centrally, and there's a slide along the way to where we break that down a little more, give you an idea what that is. Here's the general fund's budget distribution. You see that 68% of our general fund budget goes directly to schools, and another 14% goes to school-supported services. So approximately 82% of our general fund allocations either go directly to schools or on behalf of schools. In our direct school allocations, the $782 million, that's broken down into $337 million was the flexible funding that was used in the Fair Student Funding Model for this year. There was $207 million in locked funding, that's locked positions, principals, ELL, positions, special education dollars and so forth are locked down. $142 million for our charter schools. We had unlocked special education funds of $79 million. $13.7 million was allocated for our alternative options program, and another $3 million for some targeted funding. So $782 million went directly to school budgets. In fiscal year 19, this is the first year where we're changing our Fair Student Funding Model, and this is kind of a year where we're using a bit of a hybrid because we've made some changes on how the weights are done. We're trying to work more on trying to direct more dollars towards poverty and concentrated poverty, but when we did some of the allocations, some schools won, some schools lost, and it was decided that in this first year we didn't want any schools to actually lose dollars as a result of the Fair Student Funding Model. So we did put some additional dollars in for those schools that lost money as a result of the model so that they would not lose any money as a result of the model. Some of those schools lost money, but they lost money because of drops in enrollment, not because of the Fair Student Funding Model. Another portion of the Fair Student Funding Model, we set a baseline, and our baseline services are pretty much what the district feels a school absolutely has to have in order to operate. And there were some schools that either because of their size or other issues, they did not necessarily, through Fair Student Funding, they did not get enough money to meet that minimum. And so we also had a supplement, a baseline services supplement that would bring those schools up to make sure that they had the dollars to meet those minimum qualifications for what we wanted for the school. The charter formula update, we moved the 2% administration fee. It was calculated differently in the formula in fiscal year 19 for the first time. And we also took some non-distributed fringe charges that had been not distributed to charter schools, but are directly allocable to charter schools and charter school employees. And in the past, some of our traditional schools had to eat some of that cost because it was done centrally. And so we decided in fiscal year 19 that sick leave conversion, which is a benefit for district employees, that they're able to cash in a few days of their sick leave if they don't use them at the end of the year. There's a calculation for that. So that sick leave conversion payment is part of salary, and as a result, that will be allocated to charter schools in fiscal year 19. Tuition reimbursement for teachers that go back for additional education and are eligible for tuition reimbursement. Charter schools will pay for that. And also long-term substitutes. Long-term substitutes in the past have been funded centrally. And we figured that a lot of times when you get a long-term substitute, it's because you have a vacancy in your school, and we would give a long-term substitute to a charter school, and the charter school would have the long-term substitute, and at the end of the year, they'd be able to cash out any dollars they saved as a result of the vacancy. So we just felt in fairness that the charter school should pay for the long-term substitutes that they use during the year. So the per pupil decrease for charter schools approximately $271 in fiscal year 19, from $9,288 to $9,017. This just gives you a slide that shows you where the centrally budgeted allocations went by office, and I won't go through them. This slide just gives you a breakdown of, if you remember back a few slides before, I said, 82% of our budget goes to schools or school-supported services. 14% went to school-supported services, and this is a breakdown of what those are. You see it's transportation and utilities and non-public education, out-of-county living arrangements, those things that we're required to do. The one thing that there are certain contracts in both the Chief Operating Officer's office and also in the Chief Academic Officer's office, and we've identified what some of those are. School police, so there are some of the things that are done. They're budgeted centrally, they're budgeted on behalf of the schools. Now we get into staffing.
So this slide is just talking about the changes in enrollment and changes in staffing. So on the left-hand side, you see the changes in enrollment in the last few years since 2012. No, that's not right. Is it? I can't read. It's too far away. Is it 2012? So enrollment has gone down. I believe it's about 4%. Where on the right is the reduction in central staff has been in that period of time, which is more like 20%. So part of the challenge is that we've had tight budgets for many, many years, and we've been taking reductions, and we've been taking them a lot more quickly than the enrollment has been declining. So that is not really sustainable, and so we were really thoughtful this year about where we need to make some investments in order to address some of that. We have not fixed it, but we've been trying to address some of that issue. This is just talking about folks who are more focused in the schools, because we've gotten questions in the past about how much of the central budget is really focused in the schools. So on the right-hand column, you see the total number of centrally budgeted staff, which is 1,100 people, basically. On the far right, you'll see about 419 of them are fully in the schools, and another 161 are more than 80% of their time in the schools, just to show that a large portion of the folks that are even centrally funded are really most of their times in schools. That's it. Mm-hmm. You tell me to 11, I can't see. Oh, I can see it, maybe. Mr. McFadden, tell me when I get there.
It's right there.
This
it's
one?
12.
Oh,
No.
this one. Okay.
So these schools, this is a question that may not be relative to this, but I'm curious. So a school like in the literacy site, do they stay in that particular focus for several years, or do they apply the following year for a different one of the three social emotional restorative practices of literacy?
So it's a great question. So the blueprint is a focus on creating professional learning communities. So we're really trying to develop the capacity of staff to do more effective professional learning. So we hope that in the time that they're intensive learning sites, that they are developing their capacity. In the case of literacy, for example, so they'll have those coaches who are working with their staff to develop their staff to do more collaborative learning at the school and really teach literacy more effectively. For a year, and then the schools will pick up that coach position in the school. So we wouldn't expect a school to move on to wholeness the next year, but that they would keep doing that work and they would keep being part of the professional learning community. But the investment from the school district in that initial, really intensive use of experts to work with their staff and develop their staff would be really intensive for the year that they're an intensive site. And then they would be part of the broader professional learning community where all schools are getting some continued support.
Thanks.
Commissioner Cannon? Could you just go over the fund balance again? I know we're making a commitment to be less reliant on it. Can you just go back to that slide and tell me what has been the less reliance over time? Where are we overall? How much we're spending down on it in this proposed budget? A little bit more historical, like where we are now, where we've been.
I can give you a little bit of historical contents. I can tell you in fiscal year 17, we budgeted $53.6 million of our fund balance in order to balance the fiscal year 17 budget. We were able to reduce that to $20.7 million in fiscal year 18, and we're reducing it further to $15 million in fiscal year 19. The idea is that we want to get that down to zero. We wanted to do it over a three-year period, so we've gone from 53 to 20 to 15. Whether we'll be able to pull the whole 15 off in fiscal year 20, remains to be seen, but we certainly feel that we'll be able to continue to reduce our reliance on fund balance and be able to have our budget balanced based on the revenues that we actually receive.
Just not for now, but could you go a little bit further back for me and just pull
Yeah.
those numbers? That would
Yeah,
be
we
just
can do
helpful.
We
And then what percentage of our budget is in the fund balance as we're proposing in FY19?
Okay, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
I have a related question that is not for discussion here, but it just occurs to me that one of the ways we determine, what's available in fund balance is your budget to actual. And we haven't seen a budget to actual lately for FY18.
We provided the actual financial statements. We haven't provided a forecast at this point, but
Yeah, that's
the forecast will be coming shortly.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That would be a very helpful
Yeah.
thing because it kind of helps to put it in, because if you miss your mark by a lot, then that could throw this off.
Yeah.
But so that's what I'm saying. It's for just to flag it that it will be.
Okay.
Question from the board, Commissioner McFadden?
For the public's sake, can we discuss the 11 million that holds harmless?
Okay, as part of our state allocation, the funding formula, the state funding formula is based on enrollment. And as everyone pretty much knows now, our enrollment went down significantly in fiscal year 18, our September 30th numbers. So in theory, even with the additional dollars that we got as a result of the $60 million legislation from last year that gave us additional money for declining enrollment and gave us additional money for pre-K funding, the district stood to lose approximately $11 million according to the state funding formula. The governor actually put the actual $11 million into the revenue that was given to us. It was not mandated for him to do that, but he put the $11 million in there in order to hold us harmless so that our revenue would be flat from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19. So not only did we got a little bit of a bump on that also in the declining enrollment grant because our enrollment went down more than what was expected. So we got a little bit more than was originally anticipated, but that was legislated. This $11 million was not mandated, and it was just something that the governor put in the in the budget as a hold harmless. And I think there were, and you don't quote me on it, but I think there were 3 or 4 school districts that got some level of it, but most of them were in the like hundred thousands, and ours was 11 million.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. This is not a regular board business meeting where we have the 3-minute limit. So we only have 2 people signed up to speak. So we'll start with Cassie, and Allison and John, I assume you'll be here because the questions that they ask, people can comment, but if you also want to ask a question, that's fine too. But even though we're not going to hold it to the 3-minute limit, let's kind of keep it tight so that we can understand what your issue, question, thoughts are and respond to it, if that's okay. Keisha, you good with that? To the extent that yeah, okay, got it. All right, so Cassie and company. You're good, thanks, sorry about that.
Madam Chair, and good evening to all of the commissioners. My name is Cassie Moss, and I am proud to be Greater Baltimore Committee. This one. Maybe I should turn the mic on. Sorry about that. We were founded 30 years ago by BUILD, Baltimoreans United in Leadership Development, and the Greater Baltimore Committee. And we work in city schools, high schools, and middle schools every day alongside teachers and school counselors giving college and career advice. And I'm joined by 2 students, I should be quick to add. To my right, I have Morgan Maddox, who is a senior at the Academy for College and Career Exploration, who will be attending Morgan State University next year. And to my left, I have Mike Jones, who is a senior at Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School, MERVO, and who will be attending Coppin State University next year. I also want to add, I'm joined just behind me by my colleagues Jimmy Tadlock, our longtime program director, Natasha Blake McDowell, who supervises all of our college advisors, all 18 of them in the high schools, and we're in 2 middle schools. She also was, formerly at MERVO, was the CTE Teacher of the Year at MERVO. And my colleague Sarah Pramawat, who is the college advisor at ACE, who works with Morgan. So I really want the students to tell the story, but in responding to what you said, Madam Chair, I want to be very succinct about why we are here this evening. We at College Bound strongly believe that every single high school student in Baltimore City should be entitled to a full-time college and career advisor. The other people at the school work incredibly hard, the teachers, the school counselors, the administrators, but we believe that there needs to be a full-time person focusing just on college and career. And I think we have the same vision that the district has about this. Is it possible to, is this the clicker for your presentation, Allison? Can I just use it? I'm just going to go. I was really struck by Ms. Perkins-Cohen's slide number 9 about the vision. And I know there are the 3 buckets within the blueprint. And I think that we need to keep in mind with respect to student wholeness, it's very important to talk about the building blocks like the socio-emotional learning and the restorative practices. But when we think about our older students and where we want to see them when they leave city schools, the box in blue on the district school number 9, city school students graduate ready to change their communities and the world for the better. I think there needs to be somebody full-time in the high schools working directly with that, and that's what our College Bound advisors do. Currently, there are 18 of us full-time in the schools. We would like to have somebody in every high school, at least a part-time person, if not a full-time person. I realize that there are competing budgetary priorities and that the budget is going to be voted on very soon, but there's a lot of momentum around this throughout the city. Just 2 weeks ago, last night, April 16th, the City Council unanimously approved a resolution calling for an expansion of College Bound into every high school. The City Council vowed to work with partners in city schools, in the mayor's office, in the business community to make that happen. And I just wanted to bring the community here tonight, particularly in the form of our two students who have excelled and will continue to excel, because I really do think, and I think all of us here really do think it's important to have college and career advising in the high schools to help our students be whole students, and just in line with the district's vision about student wholeness beyond their time at city schools. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Mr. Mike Jones, our senior at Mervo, to talk about his experience.
Good afternoon. As she says, Mike Jones. I will be attending Coppin State University, and I'm just going to tell a little story of how College Bound helped me choose Coppin State. And it started in 11th grade when I met Miss Jobs, our College Bound advisor at Mercantile High School. She pulled many students aside in the auditorium to talk to us about what are we going to do once we hit 12th grade, after we hit 12th grade. And then she stays on our back constantly saying that you guys need to have your plan ready now, because once you leave here, it's all on your own. I've came from a 3.5 GPA in 11th grade, not knowing anything what I was going to do until I talked to Miss Job. She said, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I had no idea until she stayed on my back. I talked to her about many ideas that I would like to do, and it came across my mind that I would like to not own a business, but I would like to manage a business. And I chose Coppin State due to its relevance. It's a HBCU. It's close to home. I don't mind being away or staying right here at home, but she showed me towards, I can't remember the lady's name, but she's an advisor for Coppin State University. And she brought me along to their open house, and I had a tour all day. I love the students there, the energy, just the campus, the feeling of being on your own in college actually makes you feel you can do anything once you graduate. And I chose to major in business, actually, and will actually be attending there. Met the student body president. I can't remember his name, but I hope to see him once I leave Mervo. And just the feelings and ideas, anything you can image, you actually being a Coppin student, it feels great. And College Bound actually helped me all the way keep that image in my mind, picture it, dream about it, and can't wait to achieve it. And hopefully, class of 2022, I'll be there, Mr. Coppin, everything, just to have that Coppin heart and that Eagle pride.
Sounds like you already have it.
Thank you.
It's a perfect setup.
Hello, my name is Morgan, and I was going to Morgan State, and I've been working with Miss Sarah since I was in 11th grade. So I really didn't know nothing about college. I just knew that I wanted to always be like a computer engineer, but I never knew what school to go to, so I was just open to go whatever school. So Miss Sarah used to always take me like on college trips or bring college people to my school so I could meet with them. So I finally got a chance to sit down and actually figure out which school did I really like, and I chose Morgan because I heard it had a very good computer program, and it's close to home because I didn't want to go that far. And I actually liked Morgan when I had visited there like a while ago, and I was talking to the college rep, and I like what he was saying. And Miss Sarah, at one point in time, I wanted to give up, and Miss Sarah made me push through it, because if you give up, you just gonna always give up in life. And Miss Sarah always pushed me to get my greatest.
So Cassie, I have two questions, if I may, and then defer to Commissioner Canham, who thinks about this like 27 hours a day, literally this issue. You have 18 of them in schools now, so I have two questions. How many more would we need to have a full-time person, you're talking full-time person in each high school.
Ideally,
How many more do we need? I know I
15.
How many?
15,
There you go. And how much would that cost?
$1.3 million.
Okay. There you go.
As I said before, I do think there is momentum citywide about this. I know this city council resolution, while it does not come with any appropriations or funding, they are very excited about it. I'm hoping to get a meeting with the mayor soon about this topic. So we just would urge you, to the extent that there could be some sort of negotiation, or, perhaps city schools could put in some money, the mayor's office could put in some money, I leave it to you experts about how to negotiate that. But I just would say, and you've heard it from our students, who tell the story better than anybody else could, but if your vision really is for city students graduating, ready to change their communities and the world for the better, like it says on the slide, I think it's really important to focus on somebody in the high schools whose job it is full-time doing that.
Got it. Commissioner Richardson, can you share the mic? Yeah, it's a new revenue stream. We're charging commissioners for the use of the microphones.
Okay, have to put it in my next year's fiscal budget. How are you funded now?
So we are funded through, the advisors in the high schools are funded through fair student funding. So a principal has to put us in her or his budget. It does not cover all of our costs. We have to fundraise for the rest.
Yes.
So the college fairs and the college trips that Ms. Maddox was talking about, we fundraise for. So the thought is that if we were to get that extra influx of money, the $1.3 million, because of fair student funding, and I know Allison knows the particulars of this, basically what the district would do is they would do like a district match or a district discount for each principal, so that it would be, instead of, costing what it costs the principal now, which is $68,000 to have us in a school, it would cost far less than that. And the hope is when it would only cost $35,000 or $40,000, every principal would put us in her or his budget because they want us. I mean, we have all of the principals would like to have us, all of the high school principals. They've told us this. It's just a question of competing priorities. But the hope is, at that cost, every principal would put us in her budget.
Yeah, and so, thanks, Cassie. So I think one of the challenges when this idea came was that we have some schools who already have College Bound, and so we didn't want those schools to be kind of penalized, if you will, by us funding the extra 13 slots in other schools than the ones who had been doing on 15, I had it reversed. It's okay. Yes, that we didn't want to fund it in those schools, and then the other schools who were already doing it on their own would be penalized. So that was a part of it, and we figured this matching approach would then, allow those who are already doing it to relieve their budget pressure for paying for it. And also the other part we had talked about city council about was that there are other schools who are doing other things too, and we want them to be able to apply for, to get approved for that, because some schools have really funded a college guidance office, so we don't want them to be penalized too. So if they've invested in a strategy that's working for them, and there's not very many, but there's one or two I can think of where they have their own approach, where they have college guidance counselors, that they could let us know they're going to do that, and they would get some share of the resources too. But basically, so College Bound is a key partner, and it makes it a lot more affordable for our schools to provide the kind of assistance that that Cassie and College Bound is providing to our students.
So this is an interesting exchange. So is this under negotiation? It sounds like this is, this sounds like this is, it sounds to me like, okay, we got this, we need that.
We need the check. If we get the check, we know how to do it.
That's right.
Well,
That's
no,
right.
but-
We've already thought about how to do it once the money comes.
No, but Al, could you just give me a little bit more clarity? I mean, because this back and forth here says, not only is that a good idea, but, if we did this, we could do that, and maybe we could have, that was a
So
much
we
more
just
detailed
in our
answer than I-
conversations with city council, what we've kind of laid out is that this is the way that we just would want to make sure the resources came in a way that would allow us the flexibility to implement it in a thoughtful way that doesn't penalize schools who are already doing
Fair-
College
Yeah,
Bound.
no, that I hear
or-
all that. I mean, so I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude.
Yeah.
Because that's the part I'm commenting on. So is the city council actively engaged in this conversation?
I
Like,
think all the city council is doing is a very general
Right, they passed a resolution
well, I
a
know
couple
they don't
weeks
have
ago.
any
Yeah.
money, but
I think that, some of them are going to be advocating for us with respect to the city budget, separate from the city schools budget.
that's what I meant.
Yes.
Janet, you have to use the. Or Commissioner Richardson, sorry.
Just so that I'm clear then, because it sounds like Allison, you are in support of this, so the budgets that we've seen do not include this, or
So
what exactly is the ask tonight, I guess?
So I don't think there's an ask tonight per se. I mean, I think that, Cassie's just making sure that we're aware of that this is something that the city council is very interested in. I think that schools have funded this in their budgets, many schools. We don't fund it centrally. If schools choose to do this, they have funded it centrally already. And then if there's additional resources, we could, provide this kind of matching approach to potentially encourage other schools to do it, and then give some relief to the schools who all our school budgets, as you know, are tight. So it would be
So
very
Commissioner
helpful.
Richardson, I'm sorry, just to be clear, College Bound is coming with an ask. We would like somehow for there to be enough funding to have a College Bound advisor in every high school. Ideally, it would come from the central office, but we understand that's not the world we live in, and there, for a variety of very good reasons, fair student funding is a model. So given the constraints of fair student funding, like Ms. Perkins-Cohen said, we don't want to penalize Mr. Rivers, the principal of Mervo, for putting us in his budget, and then next year, this extra influx of money come in, and the principal at school X, who doesn't have us, gets a free person while he already has us in his budget. So that's why we were trying to do this discount across. Ideally, we would like it to come from the central office, because I firmly believe that in the 21st century, it's one of those basics that it shouldn't rely on the discretion of a principal, that everybody should have a college or career advisor.
Let's make this the 4,552nd thing that's come up.
Understood, and that's why yeah.
That's right, being creative.
Totally, so we're trying to operate in the realistic universe that is, yeah.
But it's also continues to raise questions for us. And I
Yeah.
just have one follow-up to this, and then we've got Peter and Commissioners Cameron and Babuda. So given this back and forth, there are 18 schools now. When I asked how many more and for how much, you said 15 at 1.5. Is that, I didn't try to do the math, is that at the full cost of 60, was it 68 or 65?
Yes, it's a little bit complicated by the fact that because of the 18 schools we're in now, 3 of them were only, it's through a private grant, sort of a demonstration grant, so that's not covered by fair student funding.
So it's really, so the 15 really would cost 1.5 million.
It would, particularly because we had to build in a little bit of extra cost, because as wonderful as my colleague, Ms. Blake McDowell is, she cannot supervise 33 people. So we'd have to hire a little more infrastructure. Yeah, yeah,
I'm really trying to, because I use my calculator.
Yeah.
To be able to do this, I guess, 15 and 1.5 is not very easy. I just want to make sure we were talking about full cost and not the discounted.
that would be the full extra cost that would have to come into the budget, and then it would be discounted. It would still cost the schools out of fair student funding. So the 1.3 is in addition to what the district already pays College Bound every year.
1.3, not
Is the balance. Yeah, it was 1.3, and that's the balance. The school system, through fair student funding, College Bound gets close to $1 million a year already. School by school, 68,000 by 68,000.
And if you're saying if somehow, either centrally or through the schools, another 1.3 million was made available for college and career counseling, that we would have a college and career counselor in every building.
If the principal opted to put us in her or his budget, yes. And we think that that's a reasonable assumption, because it would be so much less expensive than it is now. Now, if it were to be done centrally, it would still cost the school system writ large only $1.3 million more. But it would, instead of coming from the principal's budget, right now we're getting the $68,000 from each principal's budget. So the principals wouldn't have to pay. The district would pay that money instead. In our mind, that's all city schools' money. But the way you all run things, and I understand why you do, there's fair student funding, and then there's central, and they're different.
So to do that, we would have to take money back from the schools, which we generally try not to do. To do it that way.
I still can't tell if we're talking a discounted cost across all schools or the full boat.
The full, but the 1.3,
I
if
mean,
you just,
are we talking 34 or 68?
it depends whether we have to stick with fair student funding. If you wanted to fund it centrally, you could take the money, the money that the schools are now paying would come from the central office instead. The one.
Right.
And so it would just come from a different place in city schools. It
Right.
would only cost $1.3 million more to be
And
in
they-
every school. Yes.
And it would cost Central 68,000 per person.
Yes, times 30, times 33. So some of the money now that we're
No,
getting
I
from.
get that. I'm just trying to
Okay.
figure out if, because you had this other sort of side conversation about city council and matching and discounted costs, and I couldn't tell if you were saying with the 1.3 million, that would, plus what's already in there, if you took that money out of the schools and you added to the 1.3 million and you spread it across all the schools, if that was.
That would be enough. If you
for
took
di-
the money
to
from
do
the
it at the
schools.
discounted cost?
No, totally, free.
That's it. That's all I was trying to
Okay,
figure out.
sorry, I didn't understand.
Commissioner Canham and then Commissioner Bondima?
I've had the pleasure to represent the board at the College Bound for the past year and going to the meetings and seeing the effectiveness data. And I just think we as a board should think about when we look at the equity agenda that we're promoting, really think about how we can get this done. Because it's true, when we look at our blueprint, we are not focused enough on our high school students. 2 years ago, a young woman from Digital came here and said, and I've become convinced by this, our counselors are overwhelmed. They are not giving our students that don't have a college-bound advisor or other advisor specifically around the college process what they need to actually help them find their path. And I'm telling from a personal standpoint, I've just had my son go through the college process, and it was confusing. And whether it's the FAFSA form or the CSS profile and everything you have to get in, to me, this is a no-brainer. And it's a false narrative, I believe, to say that if we prioritize this, we can make it happen. We can either find matching appropriately, but let's be clear. We fund something like the School for the Arts centrally. We do Ingenuity centrally. We are making choices around this. The question is, do we want to make this one of our choices? And so that's something I think each board member should consider. And the idea that we have certain high schools without college and career advisors, to me, is unacceptable.
Commissioner Bondima?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle now because some of the questions I had have been answered. I'm always questioning about budgeting, but one question I had way back, firstly, I'd like to know the schools that you have these counselors in there. And at some point, do we have a list of the schools the 15 schools, right, that have the counselors
Right,
there?
18, you're right,
18.
15 funded by Fair Student Funding, and then another 3 through this private
Okay,
grant.
so 18.
Yes,
Okay.
it's on our website, but Commissioner, I can certainly
I'd
get that
like
list
to
you.
know, and if you could get that to us, I really would like to see the schools that's already funded and have the full-time counselors in there in the schools. In addition to that, before we got to this point, have you ever considered, and I hope we get to the point about putting one in every school. I'm all for that, and we should have had that a long time ago. That should have been first priority, I really believe. But I also would like to know, have you ever considered, instead of putting a full-time person or having the principals have conversations about how they can share
Yes.
and put, to have a counselor in every single school until we get this piece finished?
Yes, and in
Uh,
fact, we're doing that right now. So some of the schools we're in, like the Reginald F. Lewis School for
Mm-hmm.
Law and Business, we're only in halftime. They
Okay.
share a counselor with the National Academy Foundation, NAF.
And not only that, it would save we will have students that will be addressed in the school, and maybe not all the students. At some point, we hope that all of them would be. But it also could be a way that the principal could save some funds.
Especially for
you
the
know.
smaller schools.
So
It makes a lot of sense.
Hopefully, if this works out and we get all these different options straight, we can do what you want us to do. But in the meantime, until that occurs, we need to think about when the principals have their conference this summer, or whenever they talk about budget, I don't know. But maybe they can talk about sharing, have one of the counselors halftime at the school. At least all the students, or as many students as possible, will be addressed.
I think that's a great idea.
But
The
in the
other-
meantime, could
Yes.
I get a copy of the
So
schools?
just
that
for,
do not have it?
just for the record, and so everybody can hold this in their head for the conversation, they're in ACE, Achievement Academy, Augusta Fells, Poly, Carver, City Neighbors High, Coppin Academy, Digital Harbor, Excel Academy, Frederick Douglass, Green Street Academy, Mervo, NAF, Dunbar, Reach, Reginald Lewis, Patterson, and Western.
That's right.
You should still send it,
Yes.
but I think it'll be helpful for people listening to the conversation to sort of hold this list in your head so we know what it was a good question, Michelle.
The reason why I had the question is because I'm hoping that we have students, schools that we consider to be our top star schools, a few of them. But also, I'm hoping that the schools that are in great need will have a counselor there. And I just want to see where.
Commissioner, that's a really good point. So we actually, both with respect to the greatest need and the halftime, we have a gentleman who splits his time between Achievement Academy and Excel, which are two alternative schools. And most of the students he serves are, if they're going to college, they're going to two-year college, and they're hoping to avail themselves of the Mayor's Scholars Program at Baltimore City Community College. And the principals at those schools really appreciate our counselor who's there, who used to work at Morgan State, actually, in admissions, because he has been helping the students enroll for the FAFSA. The beauty of the Mayor's program is that it generally is free community college at Baltimore City Community College, but you have to have filled out the federal financial aid forms. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the program. So he is there enrolling students, signing up students for the FAFSA. So we are in citywide schools from Western and Poly to alternative schools to small schools. I mean, we're in a really broad range of schools.
Doctor,
So we're in two middle schools through a state grant, NAF and ACE.
Dr. Mondima, I wanted to respond to one of the things that I've learned. This is a funding issue. The idea of sharing, even they split schools, but from the conversations I've had with counselors, even with the load they have an enormous amount of students that they're serving. So the idea that a part-time person could even take on more is kind of unrealistic. This really, I think, does get down to a funding issue. But that's what I just wanted to kind of respond to that. And the other piece is when I ever think about a quality partner and expansion, it is about, do they have the capacity to recruit and bring in good people? And that's one thing I wanted to just have you respond to, Cassie. Let's say you could you find 15 good people?
Thank you. Thanks to my colleagues in the audience, yes. I mean, Jimmy and Natasha, my colleagues on the program team who do hiring and recruiting, think that we could pull it off. Yes.
Commissioner Richardson? Thanks.
I wanted to thank Peter because he was very helpful for me. I didn't know if this replaced guidance counselors in schools, but it does not.
Not at all. We work side
It's
by
a
side.
support to
The guidance counselors,
Okay.
as the school counselors, as you know, have so many other duties.
Right.
Making sure students meet their graduation requirements.
Exactly.
Doing social work. I mean, just there's a lot going on. And in many of the schools, like Poly, for example, the college-bound advisor at Poly and the school counselor actually split the class so that they work together because it's such a big class, and the students there, because they've tested to get into it, many of them do have the academic credentials to go to, to get into a four-year college.
Okay. The only question that I have, and it is like a data question, do you have data that shows when you're in a school how is there an increase in students that get into college?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So,
A slow pitch.
yes. Next week, a report will be produced by BERC, the Baltimore Education Research Consortium, which it's a partnership between City Schools, Morgan, and Hopkins, showing that, yes, we make a difference. And what they did was there's one school where we had one college-bound advisor, and then the next year we got a private funder to pay for a second college-bound advisor. And this year with the second college-bound advisor, we had an increase in college applications, FAFSA forms filled out, and ultimately college enrollment, both in four-year and in two-year. The other thing that the study will show is that I keep mentioning we're in 18 schools, but 15 of them are fair student funding. Then we've got the 3 that are grant funded. So this BERC study looks at the 3 that are grant funded, and last year was the first year we had this grant funded position, compared the data from the grant-funded schools where we had a college-bound person compared to the rest of the district, and having a grant-funded college-bound advisor again, with those same metrics, FAFSA completions, college acceptances, and college enrollments, the numbers were higher where there was a college-bound advisor. So I'm told by Burke that report is coming out on May 10th.
So am I understanding correctly that the Burke report is only going to focus on those 3 schools?
Well, so the trick is, it's hard to compare apples to apples. So to show, like, when you had a college-bound, like having a college-bound advisor for the first time versus never having a college-bound advisor. So we thought the best way to do that would be to compare the one school where it was very clear, this year we had, year 1 we had 1 advisor, year 2 we had the second advisor.
Oh, and you're saying the schools that have been supporting it through Fair Student Funding have been doing it, so that, okay, that makes sense.
And also, and this is, part of what we ideally would like to see is we would like a commitment to be in a school for 4 years. Because we would like to meet a student in the 9th grade and watch her cross the stage of graduation in the 12th grade and build up that relationship, start meeting our 9th graders. Because of the uncertainty of Fair Student Funding, there might be a new principal, there might be no budgetary money available. We don't know from year to year whether we're still going to be in a school the following year. Most of the time it works out, but sometimes it's a nail biter, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and there's a new principal who doesn't know us, and so we would like to have that continuity so we could really build those relationships. And we think that we really would make a difference if we had the certainty of being in a school for 4 years.
One final question for me. I had the same question that Commissioner Richardson had, but I whispered in Peter's ear instead. The relationship between the college-bound counselors and the school counselors, and that was helpful. So that makes, that I was looking at the list, and when you were sort of ticking off, you mentioned City, Polly. City's not on this list.
We're not in city.
So
Ms. Harcum has her own college advising staff that she pays for out of her own budget. I think she's got 2 full-time advisors and maybe
She
3
just
and a-
did 3. She's
So-
increased to 3.
So this is a kind of a related question then. And if it was already sent to me, I'll confess I get behind on my email. So at the last, because I think I saw this come through, at the meeting last week, was it April 24th, I asked to see a copy of the guidance that we give to principals.
You said the last budget, the 24th.
4th, yeah, at our board meeting. Anyway, I've asked for this for a couple years now. I'd really like to see the budget guidance that we give to principals, because, yeah, I might have missed it, so I'll do my own homework and find it. If not, I'll ask.
There are 3 schools.
But I want to, but what this is raising for me is, high schools tend to be larger. They're Fair Student Funding, principal autonomy, people are given the opportunity to make choices. Like, how strongly in the budget guidance for a high school is this type of expenditure? This is, and I'm just thinking about the budgets for these large high schools, and this just doesn't sound like a lot of money. So, but I know they have hard choices, but there's something about this that if I'm running a high school, well, I'm not, so I actually shouldn't pretend that I am. I don't know how hard it is to do the budgeting for a high school, so I'm going to stop there.
But-
I would like to, I'm going to review, it's hard, so like scratch that from whatever record this is on. It would be good to see the guidance, so let's each of us dig into board docs and see if we can find it, because I want to see how it's represented in there so that a person is affirmatively choosing not to do this in their high school. But they might have, health needs, mental health, there are other counselors, I mean, there's so many needs.
So the guidance, it has a ratio for guidance counselors, but as Cassie's saying, like guidance counselors are doing a lot of things, they're not just doing college guidance, so that's the difference. So the question is, should we be investing more in college guidance?
In career.
And career. I mean, we're
career,
called
college and
college-bound,
career,
but we really do meet students where they are. I mean, my colleagues are better able to speak to this, but, Miss Sarah, who's worked with Morgan, she works with students to go to college and the military and career.
But so guidance counselors do a range of things. I mean, yeah. I mean, and if there was more, they could do more college guidance, just not enough of them.
So then, is there a relationship between this and our CTE office? Like, is this something that you could be more closely connected to? I need to ponder this a little bit and formulate my questions, because this seems like there's something here that we're missing, and should be able to
You're
make
right.
this
Should we have school principals budget this, or should we help them budget it, or should we contribute to them across the
Or
board?
should you fund it centrally?
Or should we fund it centrally to help them all do it and lower their costs? There's lots of different ways to do
Just
it.
remind everybody, if we budget
Yeah.
centrally, we are cutting the amount to schools. The
Right.
current budget landscape, that's where it would have to come from.
Right, so we're cutting the
That's
amount
true.
to
Or other
school-
programs.
We're cutting the amount to schools, but we're centralizing some priorities.
Fine, I'm just saying, like, it's not coming out of nowhere. Like,
No.
we would have to reduce the amount we're giving to schools now.
Got it,
Um,
got it.
The one thing I would say is, I just want to emphasize, is which I think we said, but it's even if we hired more guidance counselors, that wouldn't solve this. College advising and career advising is a specific skill set to help youth get to their next step that I don't think every guidance counselor just has, and that this organization is specialized in. I'm not saying that they're the only organization, city's figuring it out too, but it is a specific skill set to help kids get to their next step.
City School for the Arts and Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women all have their own college advisors that aren't college-bound, who are great, you know. So we just want to be in the places that don't have someone, which is most of the schools.
So your number of 15 more
Does not include them.
doesn't include them. So I guess the better question is not how many schools are you in, but how many schools have this service?
As far as we know, it's those three.
Is that right? So it's 18 plus 3, 21.
Right,
Okay.
18 for college-bound, 3 on their own.
Okay, yeah, I frankly don't care. It's like,
Yeah.
you guys are great, but if somebody's figuring it out, I don't really, like, just sounds like should be more of a priority. Okay, and Allison, I'm not discounting, I do understand the implications. It's a constant refrain of what should everybody get? What should you be able to count on?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Is there
We have an-
anything you suggest that we?
We have
Oh.
another question, comment.
And I'm probably
Virginia.
saying what you were saying a little differently, but yes, in the guidance to principals, and/or our recommendations around what staffing should look like in a school, if this is a priority, that seems like a place where it could go. And then, as you're considering guidance counselors, if we're saying this is a part of what staffing should look like in high schools, then no matter where it's coming from, it's still something that will be on everybody's mind.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions for us? I know I heard your timeline, the budget is getting voted on next week by the school board, and then goes to the city council the day after that. Is there anything we should be doing or talking about between now and then? Which schools we're in? Absolutely, we'll follow up tomorrow morning.
Sending a link to that part of the website. I can't think of anything to do in the meantime. We've asked and you've answered all of our questions. It comes down to, the pie's not big enough to do the things that we want to do for our kids. A. B, there's not, it's not on the table now to change fair student funding. So once we start centralizing things, that's a slippery slope, which some would argue that's not a bad thing, but we have to do that more thoughtfully. You know, we had a thoughtful process this year to look at the fair student funding weights. And while everybody didn't get everything they wanted, it was a conversation that finally took a fresh look at that and asked and answered a lot of questions. So we hear you, but unless somebody else can think of something, I can't think of anything else we need from you. You've given us the numbers and the city council conversation has started. I would continue your advocacy there. That seems like a very good idea. I think this mayoral administration has been nothing short of awesome on her support and articulating the value of creating college as an option for all of our kids. I mean, that's just the use of the bully pulpit that creates the conditions in Baltimore where people can really see that aspiration and imagine kind of pulling together to make it happen. So I would definitely stay the course on that.
Okay. And so there's no need for us to testify in front of the full board next week?
We kind of, I mean,
This
there's
is-
two of us missing.
Yeah. so that you've heard us.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I feel like you've been heard, and I don't
Okay.
want you to have to waste your time. I mean, this is a more effective, if you come to the full board, you're going to be timed.
Right.
You're going to sit there for 3 minutes because there's so much more going on.
Understood.
I feel like this has been a much more effective, don't y'all feel like we've had a much more effective ability to talk?
Okay, thank
So
you very much.
I think you're good.
Okay, thank you
Thanks.
all
Thanks,
very
Cassie, and
much.
thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate that. And to your team, too.
Yeah.
Good job.
Especially the students.
Yeah. Okay, Keisha?
Long time no see.
What, you think we wouldn't want an opportunity to chat with you? Wait, are all the pages one piece, or is it three? All right, Peter and I can share. Peter and I can share. I don't think so. Yeah,
They're all starting to run together for me.
it's okay. We don't know. Yeah. You're funny.
I'm gonna go through.
It's a multiple choice test.
I want to go through the first page and then I'll give it to you, Commissioner McFadden. The first page. Yeah, once I finish, because I don't have enough. Okay, sure. Okay. I am looking at the page where it says extreme poverty, low income, and special education. And this is from the one with the graph, yes. And this is from the 2017-2018 operational budget. And basically, I just wanted to look at how low income was around 80-something%. And because we changed how we measure poverty to extreme poverty, that it actually went down drastically. And therefore, the amount of students that are captured in our fair student funding also went down drastically. So I wanted to give you the graph to some of the comments that I have made in public comment at school board meetings, because I know in the past some of my numbers been off.
That's fun.
Okay. Oh, and part of my concern is that when ACLU and teachers and community members and parents came out to speak about how we measure poverty and concentrated poverty, we were under the impression that poverty would still be low income and that concentrated poverty will be direct certification. However, that is not what is being measured in our fair student funding, and that is not how it's being measured in Title I. But tonight, I actually heard that in measuring poverty for charter schools, they are going to include WIDA and Medicaid.
Allison, can you clarify that? Say that again. WIDA is,
Teaching and learning.
it was in, WIDA is a non-English speaking. Can you guys share a microphone with,
So the question is, the presentation earlier was about the renewal consideration, is not about funding, about how they would be considered for the like students for renewal.
Yeah, but it was talking about how they was going to measure poverty as
For-
part of
to
that.
compare schools for performance, to evaluate their performance to schools that are similar, and so that's how they would look at the school's poverty rate for that purpose. It's not about funding.
I know, but I like that idea. So,
let the record show.
yes.
So you know that we're not allowed to use, so we can't use Medicaid for distribution of Title I and.
And what about WIDA?
And same with WIC.
WIDA.
We can't use WIC either. So we're not allowed to use
You're talking
those.
WIDA or WIC?
WIDA, WIDA.
WIDA, we do use for fair student funding. That's in the new formula. That was one of the changes we made in the new formula. We included WIDA. WIC and Medicaid we're not allowed to use in the distribution of the title dollars because it's not allowed. It's not part of what the state allows us to use.
Does
in the
that covers
calculation.
the immigrant population under WIDA?
So in the changes that we made to fair student funding this year, we did, we have a poverty rate and a concentrated poverty rate. So if we're counting poverty for that, we include that any students who are directly certified as well as any students who score a 1 or 2 on the WIDA, which would be the lowest level of English proficiency, because we wanted to make sure that we were counting some students who may not be qualifying for some of those direct certification programs like SNAP or TANF, but may also be high poverty. And we reasoned that students who have the lowest level of English proficiency would likely be the newest entrants to the country and least likely to be qualifying for some of those other programs. That's why we count it in the way we count poverty for fair student funding.
Okay. So my concern is that when they changed how they measure poverty, it was never addressed to parents in the community. And when I look at the measurement, it drastically decreased, changing from low income to extreme poverty, which is direct certification, and then how you measure it using it in the fair student funding. So with that being said, since the district is actually still receiving $1.3 billion, and school in the district is held harmless for enrollment decline, and traditional schools are held harmless for the new fair student funding formula, then I'm trying to figure out why is it that and this is where we go to the page where it says steps for determining fair student funding for traditional schools. This one. And this is in the 2018-2019 operational budget. So if the district is held harmless for enrollment decline, and traditional schools are held harmless for the impact of implementing the fair student funding formula, then this year the fair student funding formula starts at $345 million, and it goes down to about $36 million. It goes down to about $337 million. However, last year, it started at $385 million. So I'm trying to see if they were held harmless, how did it go down significantly from $385 million to $345 million, if that indeed is the case. Also, if you turn the page over, if you turn the sheet over where it says charter per pupil amount, at the very bottom, the paragraph, charter schools receive $142 million, but it also says that taking into account that 15,804 students projected to attend charter schools in 2018-2019, 9,017 per pupil, the district allocate for charter schools in FY19 budget is $142,504,668. On top of this per pupil amount, charter schools will receive services or funding from the district office that include special education. So I would like to know, what is the amount per pupil that charter schools are receiving for special education, and what is the amount per pupil for traditional schools? Can I see that in the operational budget? I have not seen it. I don't know what the number is, so I'm looking for transparency. Also, for students with disabilities, programming for PK students and English language learners. So if they're receiving additional amount for pre-K, what is that? And the additional amount for English language learners. Can I see that chart for charter schools and for traditional schools? In specialized transportation, I thought transportation was for all schools and that they came out before we did the before we got to the per pupil amount.
Specialized transportation does, but not MTA transportation.
So traditional schools get MTA transportation too, right? They get the
So
bus
traditional
passes.
schools get MTA transportation provided for them centrally. Charter schools need to pay for, and contract schools pay for MTA transportation.
Okay. And administrative resources
Keisha?
and support.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
You've, I think you have a list. I erred in not taking, right, I mean, I'm listening to you, but I wasn't writing down all your questions. Do you have a way of following up with the specific question? Can you just ask for a series of things?
Okay, so I would like to know the additional amount that charter schools are receiving for all of these areas. The additional amount that they are receiving for special education compared to charter schools. The amount that charter schools are receiving for pre-K students compared to traditional schools. The amount that they are receiving for English language learners, because this was all in additional to the 142 million. Also, the amount that they are receiving for specialized transportation, and the administrative resources and support exceeding the 2% contribution. I would like to see those amounts on the operational budget, because all of that is an addition to the 142 million.
So Commissioner Kashani,
I want to, yes, but just 1 second. Commissioner Bondima?
I'm following, I was following up to a point, but what you're saying is quite interesting. But do you have a list? Because you've named about 5 different things. I got lost on the third one.
Oh, it's right here in the paragraph.
No, okay.
Yeah, it's right there.
Your question.
My question is,
Yeah,
I would like to.
everything you have is clear.
Yeah.
But you had a number of questions, and I was wondering, so all of us can see it, is it possible that she could send your questions, or you want to take all the questions right
Well,
now?
I think that.
can I try to generally answer?
Yeah, why don't you let her generally
okay.
answer, and then I'll restate what I think she asked for, because when she repeated, I think I wrote it down, so, because, yeah, I'm glad you raised it, because Tanisha did ask me to take notes, so I got it.
So why don't I try to generally answer Ms. Goodwin, and then, and I understand you want some of this in writing, so I'm fine with that, but I was going to try to give a general answer, and finance can correct me anywhere I go astray. But for the services that we take off the top, like specialized transportation, pre-K, special ed, and English language learners, traditional schools and charter schools receive the resources in the same way. So for special ed, a school would receive some combination of services, I guess it's all services and some locked dollars, based on the composition of students in their schools and the IEPs of those specific students. So if, the number of students they have who are LRE A, B, or C, that would dictate the resources that they get. That would be true for a charter school or a traditional school. It depends on the composition of their students. Same for English language learners. If the school has English language learners, they would receive the resources based on the needs of the students in their school. Pre-K is funded on a staffing model, so any school that has a pre-K gets a teacher and a paraeducator to staff that classroom. So if they have a pre-K classroom, they get the teacher and the para. They don't get the resources for it. That's same at a traditional school and a charter school. And specialized transportation, same thing. They would get the service based on the IEP of their students. So any students who get transportation as a requirement of their IEP, or any homeless students, they receive specialized transportation, and they get the service. MTA is the one difference for charter schools, where charter schools, they pay for that out of their per pupil, and traditional schools, they get the MTA bus tickets provided centrally. Oh, I'm out of touch with that, because that's changed. Thank you. So that is old. Sorry, that was an old script that was been in my head for a while. I got to remove it. That is no longer true, because under the legislation last year, the 3 years of funding that we got, the $60 million a year, one of the things that the state did was that their MTA is providing us transportation for free. So no schools are paying for bus tickets anymore. Traditional schools, so traditional schools aren't getting, we don't have to pay for it centrally anymore, so it doesn't come out of their per pupil, and charter schools don't have to pay for it out of their per pupil either.
So Keisha, that's very helpful, and it's always a good reminder. But, so while it is possible to provide you with the comparison, charters versus traditional, for special ed, pre-K, English language learners, specialized transportation, it won't tell you anything. Because that's why we take that money off the top before, that money comes off the top before we make the split between traditional and charter schools in their operating budgets, because that money follows the student. Like, so if a school has, if it's, whether it's a charter school or a traditional school, if a school has more English language learners, it's going to get more of the English language learner money. We don't care if it's charter or traditional. That money is, follows the students based on their need. That's why it doesn't fall to the bottom line of the funding, of Fair Student Funding, because we don't want that money to be used in any old way. We want that money, same with special ed. It's very important that the special ed money goes where the special ed students are. Some charter schools have a lot of special ed students. Some traditional schools have a lot of special ed students, and then there are schools in both columns who have less. So we can provide you with the information, but just, it won't, you can't make a comparison unless you go school by school and understand exactly how many special ed, English language learners, students in need of specialized transportation, and pre-K. Well, that's not per student,
And
that's a class.
and the range of needs of those individual
And
students.
it's
So the
not
range of-
one size fits all either.
The range of resources that provide to students depends greatly on their IEP. So there, we have students who cost, some of our separate public day students, the average cost of serving those students is about $100,000 a year. We have those are our non-public placements. The separate public day students cost in the range of $25,000 a year or so. So it depends a lot on the needs of the specific student, and the cost can vary greatly.
Okay. I would still like those numbers for how much per pupil for special ed in ESOL, depending on the LRA, B, C, whatever that is.
I think we probably have some methodology that kind of lays out just generally how LRE, A, B, and C work.
And I would like to see amount over a time period, started 2015 to the present. And as a matter of fact, I emailed the budget team today with some of these questions already.
Ms. Goodman, I just need to make one clarification. Even if we get down to the LRE, A, B, and C, it's still, that amount is going to depend on the individual education plan. So two students in the same LRE will cost different amounts. So it's you're not going to get a per pupil. You can't get down to a per pupil for that.
I have a different idea, and I'm not trying to, because I know the staff will do this. So they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering if you could, because you think about this a lot, so I'm thinking you have a theory here. Like, you're trying to figure something out, I think, and you think that this is the best data that will help you figure it out. So let's maybe dig a little deeper, and what's the question you're trying to answer that you think this data will help you? Because I think what might be better is if let's really get into what you're trying to figure out, and then let's all think together about what's the data that will help you get there. Because sure as I'm sitting here, and I'm not an educator, and I've got my educators and my numbers lady telling me, this ain't going to help you figure out something, because it's student dependent and it's irrelevant whether it's charter or, even my charter parent here is like, no, that ain't going to help you. So I want to make sure that we don't put our staff in a data search, which they will do, and then you get it and then you can't tell anything. Let's try to get at what you're trying to get at.
Okay, so I guess when Alonzo came up with the Fair Student Funding, he had a weight for LRA, LRC, LRB, whatever it was. And then there was a specific amount that went to special educated students. And so I am still looking for what that amount is. And it was for self-contained, it was for inclusion, it was for half self-contained and half conclusion. And so I'm still looking for what that per pupil amount is.
Sorry, I think there.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful to really kind of understand what your real question is.
So I think a couple things that might be helpful. One is that I just can't remember if the budget book has it, but in the past we have had summaries of what the general per pupil is for LRE, A, B, and C. So we can provide that to you. The other thing that I think would be helpful that I think is going to be in the next round of the budget book is, I don't think it's in this one, but I know staff is working on an appendix item that would help look at things like the special ed amount that is charged to the charter formula, where that comes from, where are the pieces in the budget book that make up that amount, so that you just can understand the methodology, a little bit of the pieces that come out of the formula at the top for special ed, for ESOL, where you can find those numbers in the budget book. So I think that might be helpful to get at some of what you're looking for.
Okay, so again, it brings me back to what I started with, and I guess this is pretty much where I'm going to end, that I would really like for parents in the community to have a discussion on how we want to measure poverty when it comes to Title I, or when it comes to the weights for fair student funding. And because I disagree with direct cert covering poverty. I believe it should be free and reduced and a multiplier to capture undocumented immigrants. And I think that concentrated poverty should be the direct cert. And that's my recommendation as well.
On that point, because we talked about this a little bit the other night, we don't have the free and reduced anymore because we don't collect the forms. And I think this is a really important point to understand as the district, based on a lot of community feedback, not just in hearings and forums, but over and over at board meetings, people want us to have equity policies and think about what is equitable in the funding of schools. One step in that direction was to acknowledge that schools that have a larger number of students in extreme poverty need more resources. So it's the same number of resources. So some schools lose money, some schools get more money. But the God's honest truth is that's a step towards looking at funding through an equity lens. So yes, some schools did get less money. And I think we did build a factor in for the Allison, the issue of the large immigrant population. Isn't there a factor built in there already?
In the way we count poverty, so with students who are WIDA 1 or 2 are counted as poverty in the poverty measure for both the way we count poverty, both for the regular poverty weight as well as for the concentrated poverty
So
weight.
it's helpful, I know it's helpful to me, because having had a chance to engage with you a couple times now, to know that how strong of an advocate you are for, taking a fresh look at that. So I am hearing you, but I'm also hearing in the back of my head the large numbers of people who have said we need to really keep equity in mind. And so we're again, with a pie that's overall too small, trying to balance all those different needs, it's hard.
Okay, so I guess that just brings me back to the point that if they're covered in concentrated poverty has to be direct certification at 80% in a school. And so if the students aren't in those schools where there's concentrated poverty, then they are not covered under concentrated poverty, because they may be in a school that only have 50 or 60% direct certification, but yet there's still ESOL 1 and there's still ESOL 2, according to the testing of WETA, according to how they test. So with that being said, I want to leave with this point that I made when I first started, is that since the district was held harmless for enrollment decline, and traditional schools were held harmless from the impact of this fair student funding model, then why has the amount from last year of $385 million decreased to $337 million?
It's partly enrollment, right?
But we are held homeless for the enrollment decline, and the district received money.
We were held harmless from the revenue perspective, not from from the revenue, from the enrollment decline. We had less kids.
So we still had the revenue. So why was the amount decreased? Because we still have the revenue.
1.168, and this year it's 1.156, so close, I mean, it's close. So these are the revenue numbers. So,
What I hear you asking for is what's the pot that went to traditional schools last year to this year? And what's the reason for any
Yes,
change
because
in it?
last year overall, it was still 1.3 billion of revenue that the district received, and this year is still 1.3 billion that the district is receiving. And if all of these things were held harmless, enrollment decline, and the impact of implementing the new fair student funding model, then why has the amount to traditional schools decreased from 385 million to 334 million?
okay, got it. So there's another community budget meeting tomorrow night at Liberty. There's one on Thursday at Arundel. And is that the last one? Yes, there's two more this week. And then the board will get a final report and vote on Tuesday.
So I recommend that it go back to 385 million. That's
Got it?
my comment,
Okay, good, thank you. So we appreciate everybody, staff, community members taking the time to come and talk to us about this and ask questions. He had to leave, Peter had to leave, but he just left. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Bondima. Do I have a second? Commissioner Richardson, all in favor? Commissioners McFadden, Bondima, Kashani, Chinia, Berkeley, Richardson. Motion passes 6-0. Meeting is officially adjourned. Thanks.